You have most likely seen it waving proudly at sports events or outside government buildings, and the red and yellow has most certainly come to be emblematic and synonymous with the iconic colours of the Spanish nation. But look close and what do you see? Centered in the core of the flag is the coat of arms of Spain, and these aren't just a collection of pretty symbols, they're a historical map and a reference to ancient mythology. Much more than this, even a bold statement of imperial ambition, as well as Spain's own internal unification. There are a lot of other things that such a small detail on a flag can represent. This is what I hope to look at in today's video. I guess first we should look at the most visually striking element, and that is the two columns that flank the shields of Spain, known as the Pillars of Hercules, and they are believed in classical mythology to have been erected by Hercules at the Strait of Gibraltar, marking the edge of the known world for the ancient Greek and Romans. And this would be the point of no return. On the one side was the Mediterranean, a basin viewed as the cradle of civilization, and on the other was a complete unknown, named Mar Tenebrosum, the Sea of Darkness itself. But beyond this, the pillars have a more recent and fascinating history that ties itself to a seminal event within the history of Spain, and this is the Islamic conquest of Iberia. The northern pillar, the Rock of Gibraltar, was named Jabal Tariq, Mount Tariq, after the Berber general Tariq ibn Ziyad, who in 711 AD led his forces and began the conquest of Visigothic Hispania, ushering in 7 centuries of Al-Andalus. And the southern pillar is found in North Africa, named Jabal Musa after his superior, Musa ibn Usair, the Umayyad governor. So ironically, the two pillars which found their way onto the flag of a Catholic kingdom are themselves named after two Muslim commanders who changed the Iberian Peninsula forever. It is in itself a powerful and layered piece of history that has found its way on a piece of red and yellow fabric. However, something even more interesting in the inscription is the fact that they say plus ultra, which for centuries was understood to be non plus ultra, wrapped around the pillars of Hercules to signify that there was nothing beyond the Strait of Gibraltar. And this phrasing, nothing further beyond, perfectly encapsulates our warning. It acts as a declaration of finality, and that this was the end of the known world, the natural border of what was known to man. However, this would change when Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor and the King of Spain from 1516, would, after a series of events such as the Aztec Empire being conquered by Hernan Cortez and Magellan and Elcano's successful circumnavigation across the globe, as well as the discovery of the Americas more broadly in 1492, would shatter the old world view. And the reaction would be to change this phrase, as clearly there was something further beyond the Strait of Gibraltar. And so the new motto of Spain was a masterstroke of propaganda, signifying that Spain wasn't just to remain a European power, but it would take on the role of a global one and build its empire. In essence, forging this famous empire where the sun never set by going beyond, discovering new oceans, new continents, new lands, peoples, tribes, and nations. And this single change would be indicative of a shift from a primordial fear in the medieval age that had its thing in ancient civilization to this audacious bravado in the age of empire and exploration. And if Spain's motto tells the story of its outward expansion, then the coat of arms tells a very different story entirely, one that has been constantly changing over time. And the version you see today isn't something fixed in some distant past, but the result of centuries of political change, dynamic struggle, and imperial ambition. Going back to the late 15th century under Ferdinand and Isabella, the shield would be something much more simpler, combining aspects from the kingdoms of Castile and Leon, with Aragon and Sicily added in, representing the early stages of a unified Spain. But even then, it was less a national symbol and just more a reflection of a royal marriage. As Spain expanded into a global empire under Charles V, the coat of arms would become far more complex, as it would absorb vast swathes of territory across Europe, including the Netherlands and parts of Italy, which would turn the shield into a crowded map of Habsburg power. At its peak, it was less about Spain itself and more about ruling over this vast multinational empire. And then came the Bourbons in the 18th century, who would simplify things, reducing the chaos and recentering the Spanish kingdoms and adding the fleur-de-lis, marking a shift away from a universal empire and towards a more recognizable Spanish state. I also want to shout out here Bonapartist Spain, which also represented a different coat of arms, which represented the pomegranate of Granada more prominently, which is an interesting aspect of that particular flag. Even in the 20th century, the coat of arms changed again. Under Franco, it took on more authoritarian symbolism, including the eagle of St. John, and after the transition to democracy, Spain deliberately redesigned it into what you see today, removing overtly ideological elements and returning it to a more balanced historical form. So what you're looking at now is not just one moment in history, but the final version of a symbol that has constantly evolved alongside Spain itself. And so, with all this change in mind, let's break down what we actually see today. Firstly, the castle, which represents the Kingdom of Castile, can be found in the top left quadrant, the dominant military and political power within this union. And next to it can be found the lion for the Kingdom of Leon. It should also be said that when you look close at this lion, it's it's very interesting the color of it. It's not gold, not white, but it's pink, surprisingly making Spain one of the only flags in the world to officially feature pink on its flag. This makes it quite a bold choice in terms of heraldry, and the vertical red and gold stripes are for the Crown of Aragon, a maritime powerhouse which controlled much of the Mediterranean. The gold chains in a red field alongside it represent the Kingdom of Navarre, which was incorporated last into unified Spain in 1512. The chains also symbolize a famous battle where supposedly the King of Navarre broke through enemy chains. And at the very center of it all is the blue oval with golden fleur de lis. That is for the House of Bourbon, the current royal family of Spain. And a reminder that even with all the medieval and imperial history, the modern state of Spain is still a kingdom, and its dynasty is derived from the end of the early modern period. However, this is a whole other kettle of fish for another day and another video, which involves the War of Spanish Succession. And there's also a minor aspect as well, the pomegranate of Granada, representing in some regards the last vestiges of Islamic rule in Spain, as this was the rump state of Al-Andalus. A rump state is what is left over after a polity suffers a major defeat. Most famously, this can be seen in the modern world as Taiwan, which is, in the post-war period, lost most of its territory to the People's Republic of China, and now remains confined to an island. Likewise, the Papal States suffered a significant reduction during the unification of Italy, ultimately shrinking from around 44,000 square kilometers to just half the square kilometer in the form of the Vatican, one of the greatest territorial losses in history. And then there's Al-Andalus, which gradually over 700 years was pushed southwards during the Reconquista, and slowly over the course of those 7 centuries was often cited as one of the longest continuous conflicts in history. So what then is the Spanish flag? Well, I wouldn't say it's a historical document, but rather it's something that can be seen and should be treated, in fact, as a living, breathing symbol. In some regards, the pillars are not to classical mythology, but they also indirectly reference the Islamic generals who shaped the peninsula. The motto is a nod to the 16th century rebranding of the state as an empire, which prepared it for a new global age. And the shield itself represents the unification of Spain's many medieval polities prior to consolidation at the advent of the early modern period. So I believe that is the end of the video, and I hope that you enjoyed it and learned something new. I hope I've been of some use, and make sure to like and subscribe, as well as comment down below what you think, any feedback you want to give, any final thoughts you may have. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope that I've provided something of use, because I really do enjoy making these videos, and they've given me a new sense of purpose in life. And I hope that I've done something to contribute